Cults are nothing without their charismatic leaders convincing people to conform to their ideals. Today we're going to break down Rajneesh Movement, Osho, and more, and just what evils they brought into the world. Question for you: what cult do you think changed the world the most? It's a toss-up between the Manson family and Jonestown for me. Let me know your answer though in the comments, and let's see if they made today's list. So Rajneesh Movement was the self-proclaimed Moses to his faithful flock, the anthill. If you think I forgot a word there, it was intentional, so I don't get in trouble. This cult's journey began with a twisted prophecy woven from a belief in the apocalypse. As a youngster, Movement dropped out of school and started teaching himself the Old Testament. He was convinced that a war between good and evil was about to come. And, well, what's it gonna do? Bring about the end of the world. How'd you know? Thus, he converted to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and lived by their rules. No tobacco, no unhealthy foods, no booze, no substances, nada, no vices. Movement was a charismatic man. He was good at persuading others to do his bidding. Now, while organizing seminars for the Adventists, he convinced an entire group of people to quit their jobs and form his religious following. Now, he formed this commune in 1977, and it initially promised sin-free utopia and unity. Sounds perfect. He was no longer Rajneesh to the world. He was Moses. So, how do we sustain this idyllic life? The sale of baked goods. But behind the bustling bakeries, Movement's grip tightened with increasingly cruel and bizarre rules. Members were forbidden from speaking without his presence and cut off from their families entirely. Also, Buddy developed a drinking problem, which went against all of his previous beliefs. He also started spying on his followers, and if you didn't seem devoted enough, he's gonna punish you. If you want to leave, well, he's going to be enraged. And the horror didn't stop with the psychological harm. He would often discipline his followers by becoming a self-proclaimed surgeon, using crude tools like kitchen utensils, pliers, and blowtorches to mutilate his followers. And blowtorches to harm his followers. Limbs, teeth, fingers, and toes were all sacrificed. He'd ordered the faithful to break their own legs, fire at each other, and endure inhuman practices like eating what they put out. Insects and rats. Even his own offspring weren't spared. One passed away during a botched circumcision, and the other was left to perish in a blizzard. As the well-being of his seminars decreased, well, Movement became more and more convinced of his godly delusions. It became apparent to him that the world would end in 1979, and he drove his commune into the Canadian wilderness, convinced that, for some reason, God would skip a chance to destroy Quebec. So 1979 came and went, but the world didn't really end. Now, Moses explained this away by saying our world and God's world run on different time zones. However, this crazy explanation actually didn't stop his followers from romanticizing him and proclaiming him as their absolute leader. Now, in the Canadian wilderness and later the woods of Ontario, his female concubines bore him 26 new followers. Now, Moses, as the ultimate effed up cult leader, would harm his descendants, and welfare authorities would come and take them away. It took a near-death escape by Gabrielle Lavallée to expose the horrors of the anthill. Gabrielle endured unimaginable acts. We're talking hypodermic syringes in her spine, torches to her no region, and amputations. Now, in 1989, the cult's torment finally ended, with Movement imprisoned for life. And in 2011, another inmate took his life. So a figure emerged in the 1970s that would captivate the hearts and minds of thousands. Chandra Mohan Yen, known to his followers as Osho, embarked on a journey that would create the Rajneesh Movement. Now, this movement was controversial at the time, due to the founders' hostility, first to Hindu morality in India, and later to Christian morality in the US. In the Soviet Union, the movement was banned as being contrary to positive aspects of Indian culture and to the aims of the protest movement in Western countries. Now, the positive aspects were allegedly being subverted by the leader, whom the Soviet government considered a reactionary ideologue of the monopolistic bourgeoisie of India and a promoter of consumerism in a traditional Hindu guise. Osho's quest began in India, where his teachings carried a unique brand of controversy. He criticized Gandhi and really opposed state-sanctioned marriage. For him, love was meant to be free, unburdened by the chains of traditional wedlock. As he gained followers, he only got more power. His followers wore specific robes and adopted new names. So our leader, Osho, originally became Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, the leader of this crazy movement. And his original teachings eventually twisted into greed and killing. Now, the movement thrived, accumulating wealth through a myriad of business enterprises. Osho's obsession with the Rolls Royce began to reflect a new message, that wealth and spirituality could coexist. But then, as things do, they took a turn for the worse. At the peak of these tensions, a circle of leading members of the Oregon Commune was arrested for crimes including an attempted assassination plot to kill U.S. Attorney Charles H. Turner, and the United States' first ever recorded bioharm attack calculated to influence the outcome of a local election in their favor. Granted, these efforts ultimately failed. In this bio-attack, Salmonella bacteria was deployed to infect salad products in local restaurants and shops, which poisoned several hundred people. Osho was deported from the US in 1985 as part of his Alford plea deal following the convictions of his staff and right-hand man who were found guilty of the attack. After his deportation, 21 countries denied him entry, and the movement's headquarters eventually returned to India, and the Oregon Commune was destroyed in September of 1985. Now, Osho's legacy lives on, The 12 tribes began under the leadership of Albert Eugene Spriggs. Now, this cult, founded in 1972, has been responsible for manipulative tactics that trapped thousands beneath the facade of communal living. The origins of the 12 tribes movement can reportedly be tracked back to the Light Brigade ministry that operated out of the Lighthouse, which was a small coffee shop in the home of Gene Spriggs and wife Marcia. Now, the Light Brigade began living, communally, and opened a restaurant, which was called the Yellow Deli, while its members were attending several churches, before they all decided to join the First Presbyterian Church. Now, members of this brigade, well affiliated with the First Presbyterian, kinda caused friction within its establishment. What did they do? Well, they brought in anybody who was willing to come with them, including members of, different social classes, different racial groups, a practice which, wasn't really engaged in at the time. On January 12th of 1975, the group arrived at First Presbyterian only to find that the service had been canceled for the Super Bowl, and this led the group to form the Vine Christian Community Church. During this time, the group planted churches, each with its own Yellow Deli, in Dalton and Trenton, Georgia, in Alabama, and in Dayton, Tennessee. Their withdrawal from the religious mainstream turned what had once been a friction-filled relationship into an outcry against them. They began holding their own services, which they called Critical Mass, in Warner Park in Chattanooga, appointing elders and baptizing people outside of any denominational authority. The 12 tribes' beliefs resemble those of Christian fundamentalism, the Hebrew Roots movement, Judaism, and the Sacred Name movement. However, the group believes that all other denominations are fallen, and it therefore refuses to align itself with any denomination or movement. The group has strict courtship rules, and overall just really strict everything rules. So, folks become subject to rules dictating the number of toilet paper sheets you can use, also the shape of your eyeglasses. New members are forced to relinquish their identities, any property, and any ties to the outside world. This group takes manipulation to the extremes, particularly when it comes to younger members. Their relentless use of excessive corporal punishment is nothing short of barbaric. Folks that aren't even old enough to talk yet are subjected to painful spankings with thin wooden rods, all justified by twisted interpretations of biblical principles. Now, if you're gonna leave, you're gonna face some coercion and horrific threats. Those who summon the courage to escape, like John Post, face a wall of cult members who block their exit. The 12 Tribes' really awful history of young member harm allegations is one of their darkest secrets. While the cult publicly condemns intercourse-related harm, its internal handling of such cases tends to be shrouded in secrecy and denial. Allegations are often swept under the rug, with the accused being forgiven. Young members who report harm face disbelief, blame, and punishment, perpetuating a culture of silence and terror. The group supports itself through the operation of several businesses, most of which revolve around agriculture, as well as those cafes and restaurants I mentioned earlier. And how do they do that? Using unpaid and less than legal age labor. Thousands of Tokyo commuters stepped out into a spring morning in March of 1995. A doomsday cult known as Aum Shinrikyo embarked on a diabolical journey. Now, if you were just a commuter, it was like an ordinary day. But this cult had laid the groundwork for horror. 5 bags filled with a liquid nerve agent were strategically placed on the city's busy underground systems, and as the packages leaked, stinging fumes really harmed innocent passengers. Within moments, the nerve agent, which sarin gas, kinda took its toll. 13 died, over 5,800 people suffered, some folks were left blind and paralyzed. It was the worst domestic harm attack on Japanese soil. Now, this cult's name, Aum Shinrikyo, meaning Supreme Truth, emerged in the 1980s as a spiritual fusion of Hindu, Buddhist, and apocalyptic Christian beliefs. Their leader, Shoko Asahara, proclaimed himself the Christ. Asahara was sentenced to death in 2004 for the attacks, and his final appeal failed in 2011. and in June of 2012, his execution was postponed due to further arrests of members. He was ultimately executed in 2018. The Matamoros Cult, led by Adolfo de Jesus Costanzo in Mexico, was a twisted version of the Palo Mayombe tradition. His cult members nicknamed him the Godfather, or El Padrino, and he led this cult with Sarah Aldrete, who was called the Godmother, or La Madrina. Costanzo's mother had groomed him for darkness. She had invoked the supernatural, she sacrificed animals, you name it. Now Costanzo, he manipulated local kingpins, promising them immunity from law enforcement through his dark rituals. He lured unsuspecting victims to perform really awful human sacrifices at his ranch. Eventually victims were exhumed and they found some really bad stuff. Costanzo and his high priestess eluded capture though. Authorities resorted to burning the cult's shack, metaphorically smoking Costanzo out of hiding, and a violent standoff resulted in his death and the arrest of several cult members. And that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, your resident Ookie Spooky Girly. See y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.